Alright guys, I got something a little different here again. I get asked very frequently, or quite often rather, what I do when I make my challenge locks or how I go about making my pins and just random stuff when it comes to making a challenge lock basically. So I figured I would give y'all kind of an idea of what I do when I go to make one. Now for example in this one, I planned on using some pin pins, and this is one of those cores that have the extra holes here for whatever reason. I honestly don't know why those are there. If anybody knows what those are supposed to be there for, let me know if you don't care. I'm curious, because I've seen them on quite a few of these schlage kicks. But either way, what I started doing with this one is I filled these in with epoxy because I knew I was going to be using some pin pins. And then for the chambers themselves, I don't know if this camera is picking them up that well. Probably not. But chamber 1 and 4 I left alone because those are really long key pins and I want them to be able to be overset as easy as possible. So I'm using standard key pins on almost every chamber anyways, just because a good picker knows when they're oversetting, so I mean it's kind of pointless to really do a whole lot with them. I mean it's still fun, of course, and it looks a lot better. And to newer pickers it can, and even more advanced pickers, it can still prove to be problematic sometimes depending on what exactly is going on inside the lock. But either way, let's get back to this. Okay, 1 and 4 are both like unmodded it anyway. And 2 and 5, or hold on a minute. No, 3 and 5 both have undercuts and counter milling. And then on 2 and 6, we're both threaded. And let's see here. Here's the key pins that we're going to be used in this lock. And as you can see, they are all standard except number 4. And for number 4, I put a ball bearing in there and took a number 4 screw and took my Dremel with a high-speed cutoff wheel and cut off the top and the head of it. I mean, the head and the bottom of it, whatever. But either way, I figured that would be a fun new idea to try. And I was going to put a lighter spring above that chamber and make it very fun to pick. Those lighter springs, I don't know who all's used them before, but they have a lot more spring tension than your normal springs you get out of locks. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that thing is quite hard to press down on. And as you can see with your standard copper spring here, very easy. So for number 4 I'd planned on, that's another overset trap in here. And I plan to make it feel a little different than 1, so when someone's picking it, they might actually think that it's not set, and of course overset it. And like on chamber 3, for example, the reason... Here, let's get one of these key pins. But the reason it is got counter milling in it and undercuts, that's what I meant to say to begin with, but it's got undercuts and counter milling. And if you see what I paired this with, you will see exactly why that is. And this is a pin here. I know you ain't gonna be able to see it that well, but the inner pin is a nail, and the sleeve to it is serrated. So, with that counter milling and the undercuts in there, well, if I can get this damn thing back together now. It's been a long day, guys, to say the least. But let's see here. Okay. Now, when that's paired up with that, if you see, put any tension on it whatsoever, that thing will not budge at all. And that's with the sleeve on it. If you happen to set the sleeve and the nail falls back down, you have the same problem, but now it's even worse because that thing does not want to budge at all. Alrighty. And that is when there's tension on it. If it's left straight up, I mean, well, shit. If it's left straight up, it'll obviously sit right down in there and go right out with no issues. And then let's take a look at number 4 also because of the key pin that rigged up here with a ball bearing and a screw. The reason I went with a ball bearing instead of like a normal key pin is because, let's see, is that in there? Yeah. The ball bearing actually rolls smoother over the key than the actual key pin itself does, which is kind of wild, but it is what it is. Alright, let's see. I think this was the right key. Yes. Yeah. And I left chamber 4 unmodded here, but in the Bible itself, number 4 is threaded. So if someone starts picking on that, it's going to feel different with the ball bearing anyways, and if they end up oversetting, they're going to think it's a driver because of the way it feels, and because of the actual driver we're using anyways on that chamber is just a very tiny one, like one of the small schlage ones. I forget what size that is exactly, but it's the smallest size that Schlage actually recommends in their locks. Like if you look at a pinning chart, that's what that one is. Let's see here. And I had some screws here I was messing with, and I've apparently lost one. But either way, they did not turn out as well. They're snagging way too much, and I want this to be a little smoother than that. And the lighter springs, I was going to put one on chamber 4, and I forget now. I think it was chamber 3 actually. Yes, I believe that's right. I believe it's 3, 4, and 6. The lighter springs were going on. And then the other 3 obviously would have just standard copper springs. But the one on 6 was a smaller spring, and this was the driver that was going to be on it. It's another new test thing. It's got very fine serrations all the way down it, but it reduces diameter in the middle and at the end. It's not a step down, it's almost like a spool setup in a way. But the diameter down here at the end is still a reduced diameter compared to the top. I know this camera is not going to pick this pin up at all, but we are going to try. Because that is a very cool pin. I think it is anyways. And the point in this is hopefully when they set it, they're going to overset pin 2 anyways, or pin 1 I should say, because of how long the key pin is and the pressure that's going to have to be applied to that to set this pin here. And on, let's see, oh shit, what did I do with that? No, I left it in here, what am I doing? But see, there's just enough room to where you're going to have to set this dude. It's not going to move or rotate unless you do set him. There's just enough room there to where you're going to have to set him. And like I said, you might go into an overset there because of the way that feels compared to number 1, which is going to be set up the exact same way, but it's going to be a standard, or not a standard, shit. It's going to be a regular pin, a regular key pin, and yeah, I think standard is the word I was looking for there, but either way, yeah. And let's see. 2 and 6 both have really short key pins, so I was going to use a longer driver, which is one of the ones I just showed you. And I believe I was going to use a drunken spool on 2. I do not know where my other nail has went because my frickin' cats have got up here on the table again. But, let's see. And for the keys, these are keys you would usually, like some bitting you would see on a challenge lock here. Just some different stuff I had a buddy off Reddit make for me. He goes by the name Random Bits on Reddit, and he likes to make keys, and he likes American locks, and so on and so forth. But he does fairly well on his keys and doesn't charge a whole lot for them, so if you're looking for keys, he's somebody I would get in contact with. He's a pretty cool dude too. I still talk to him fairly often, actually. He actually sent me a couple silver American locks that I'm going to end up turning into challenge locks as well, so be on the lookout for them. And while we're in this video, since I've not made another video on it, here's my first pick I've made out of a windshield wiper insert. You can't really tell in this video, but that is a mirror finish too. I took some, I think I started with 400 grit sandpaper and smoothed it out a lot, and then used 2000 grit and dipped this in water every time I would go to sand on it for a couple minutes. I ended up polishing this thing up for, geez, I don't even know how long. It was a while though, but it actually works pretty well for what it is. I mean, it isn't like one of my Hank Fisher picks by any means, but it's the first one I've made. And considering it was my first and made out of a windshield wiper insert, I think it turned out pretty good. But either way, that's my thought process behind making a challenge lock. And actually, let's see, here's some of the tools I use for making the pins inside one. Oh, and to thread the chambers, I use a number 6 tap with 32 threads or whatever, 632. And here's the files I use. It's just a cheap set from Walmart. I think it was like $4 or $5. But the main files I use are that rounded file, or right here's the rounded one, and then these sharp ones, or flat ones too, to do like step downs, and I use that rounded one to do the spools. But the main thing I use for making serrations is this paring knife. It works a million times better than any file I've ever used to make very fine serrations, and it's because of how thin that blade is. It's a lot thinner than a file is. You just have to be careful using it because this side's rounded down and this side is not. So this is going to mushroom the serrations out. So you kind of want to pay attention to that because they're easier to pick when they're mushroomed out like that. But either way, I believe that's pretty much it. If I forgot anything, I'll do another video at some point. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and I can try to answer them there the best I can as well. Oh no, hold on, one more thing. Shit, what am I thinking? These are the bits I use for undercutting and countermilling. I don't know if you'll be able to see them that well, but let's see. Yeah, you kind of can. This one is that little tiny ball down there, and it's good for undercuts, and you can see that it's still got some of the grinding stone, whatever that is right here, so it also works really well for the countermilling. But you have to be careful when you're undercutting, or you'll get countermilling regardless if you tilt it too much. And this one to me works better. As you see, that's a sharp edge down there. Well, you can kind of see it. But that works a lot better for the undercuts to me. And I've seen someone else do this in a video, and I started doing it since then. But for the undercuts, I'll use a key pin as a guide. I mean, it won't be worth using afterwards, or 9 out of 10 times it won't anyways, but using a key pin as a guide seems to work a whole lot better than trying to freehand it. I mean, that works too, obviously that's how I done it beforehand, but I find it easier to use a key pin as a guide. But I believe that's pretty much it, guys. Like I said, if I forgot anything that you have a question about, just ask in the comments, or I can try to make another video at some point. But alright, guys, y'all have a good one.